Just a reminder, everybody, you can help support the Freedman Adventures YouTube channel by buying some merch, like a hat or a shirt. You can do that by going to embroiderycreations.net. Really appreciate all you do for the Freedman Adventures YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to our 2024 Spring Fishing Classic to Bass Pro Shops. My name is John, and I'm going to be hosting today your seminar on slow pitch fishing, which is a saltwater fishing method that is relatively new to us on our west coast. Basically what this new method is, it come around about maybe 20 years ago, and it started in Japan. And the reason why it started in Japan with just a small handful of anglers is that the fishery in Japan is so extensively overfished and overworked by the commercial fleets that they needed a new way of, not competing, but able to catch fish, as the little private angler or the sportsman going out and trying catching his catch for the day. They're finding out was very difficult. So there was a group of gentlemen in Japan that developed this method of deep water, slow pitch fishing, and they were catching fish that typically were not being caught before. In fact, species of fish that really had never been caught on rod and reel prior to that. Well, it started there and they developed it, fine-tuned it, and the technique is today called slow pitch. Slow pitch fishing did make its way to the United States, but it really took off on the East Coast. On down from the Carolinas, down into the Bahamas and so on, and catching all of the bottom feeding fish, as well as, some other fish that are migratory, their blackfin tuna and their dolphin fish and so on. Just in the last 5 years, it's actually worked its way to the West Coast. So we're finding ourselves experimenting with this method here locally and producing some very good catches, doing very well with it. Not that we're catching fish we've never caught before, but finding that if we're fishing bait fish versus the slow pitch jig method, the slow pitch jig method is actually producing more catch than the bait fish. And the reason why is we're simulating a bait fish, but not a fleeing bait fish, which stimulates a reactionary chase, but we're simulating a wounded or dying bait fish, which actually is an easy catch for most every bottom feeding fish and pretty much any fish that's in our waters locally. So of course, fish being opportunistic, not wanting to exceed much effort to catch their food, are definitely going to go after the wounded or the dying or the dead bait fish. So with that being said, it's out here on the West Coast and we're learning it. The tackle has evolved to meet those requirements. And so we're going to talk next about the rods. The rods are quite unique in their style. They're very short. Rod lengths can vary from about 5'3" to about 6'6", maybe 6'8", if you really want to go with a very soft or light action. This particular rod here is made by Star Rods, which is a brand that we sell here at Bass Pro. And this one has got a weight rating of 150 to 400 grams. Now that's the thing with these rods, is that they're not based on line weight. All right, they're based on the jig weight and in the grams. The reason why that's important is when you're working the jig and it's out there and you drop it down, you're going to raise the rod and that's going to lift the jig. Okay, so you're going to raise it up, the jig's going to lift, you're going to stop, and it's going to release. and you want that spring, see how that spring in the rod? It's going to pop that jig, and when it gets to that point, that's where the word pitch comes in, because it takes that jig and it's going to pitch it in a motion. All right, either left, right, side to side, whatever. And it's going to pitch it, and then you'll drop the rod down at that moment that it releases its weight, and the jig's going to flutter. Now, rods can be in various sizes. I've got a light one for up to 150 grams, a medium one for 300 grams, and then a heavy one up to 400 grams. And I'm right now looking into developing one that's going to be a 500 gram, which is going to be even stiffer than this one. And this is quite stiff. Now the rods, you notice, are very light. They have a trigger grip. This one here, I added that on, and I'll talk about that later. There's no Hypalon foam or EV foam on here. And the reason for that is we're gripping the rod with between your four fingers, and you're putting your thumb on the spool, okay? And you're going to be fishing it in this method. That's why there's no EV foam here. So you got direct contact to the rod. Another thing is that the guides are very tiny and very small, almost micro guides, like on a bass fishing outfit. And these, I don't know if you can see it, but see how they start at the top and they work their way to the bottom? Okay, so this is what they call an acid wrap or a spiral wrap. And by doing that, it allows the line to transfer to the bottom of the rod for multiple reasons. One of the main reasons is that it doesn't allow the line to ever hit the blank, you know, the blank itself, because now as it's flexing, it's going to the side here in the area where it's going to be worked the most. Another feature about it is that when you bring that rod down, sometimes that line is going to still float in the air and then come down. If the line was to land on top of the rod, now it's able to just shed right off, like rain on the roof. Well, another feature about that is if you were to hook up, a lot of times the rods, when the guides are all the way on the top, the real ones that have a tendency to do side-to-side motion, okay, when you're reeling it in. Now, if you notice, if you fish conventional, that happens. If you fish spinning, it doesn't, does it? There's no movement at all in it. The reason why, the line's on the bottom of and it's pulling straight down, and it's not twisting the rod. So it works just like a spinning rod does. Any questions on the rod? Okay, now getting to the reel. The reels are quite unique and different in themselves. Look at the size of that handle and crank. That's done for power. The reason why, you're running a high gear, a 4.2 to 4.5 retrieval. Your retrieval rate is about 39 inches per crank. If you had a small handle, the cranking is limited. It's smaller, you know, retrieval, but you also won't have as much power. The reels, this one happens to be a Accurate made here in the IE near us, and this one is a Turn 2 500 narrow, and it's actually designated as a slow pitch reel, as is this Oshia jigger, and a 1500 is a slow pitch, and this other Accurate is also a slow pitch. That doesn't mean you have to buy a slow pitch reel. You can use pretty much any smaller conventional reel as long as you've got a good retrieval rate, because that's what you want in order to work your jig in the water column. Quite light. They're usually all machined aluminum, and that's a big feature, that you want it to be light so you can work it and you're not going to be wearing yourself out, you know, working a 2-pound fishing reel. This one happens to be a star drag. I prefer star drags over lever drags. I do have one lever drag reel that I fish with, but what I like about the star drag is that once I go into free spool, I drop the jig down, I keep my thumb on it, so it just regulates the speed as it travels down. It's consistent. If you go, let it go, just spin, let it spin, you could get a backlash. But also another thing will happen is that if the lure, and these jigs I'll show you in a minute, are very unique in their shape, okay? One side is shaped like this, the other side is dished in, so it has a very unique pattern to it. And that's meant to have that fluttering action like this. If you find that you're dropping the jig down and all of a sudden your line's going fast, slow, your jig is fluttering. So put your thumb on it, slow it down, then once it starts falling consistent, now your jig is falling straight down. Any questions on the reels? Okay. Now that we talked about the rods and the reels, our next topic is really the terminal tackle. The jig that you're going to be using to pitch these are going to be jigs that are going to be a slope pitch design. All right, these have a special concaved and other special sides on them, so they're not atypical. They're they're not dimensional on both sides. They're going to be different on each side. We'll pass that around so everybody can see what it is. One of the best colors that I like to use is a white or one of the day glow colors. The reason why day glow colors is it really stimulates the fish because it looks a lot like a squid. And the squids have a tendency to glow a little bit in the light, in the water. They have that glowing feature to them. And these glow-in-the-dark ones work very well for that. I kind of skipped the line. That was actually where I was supposed to go next. On those reels, you notice they're actually quite small. And the reason why is we're not fishing big, heavy diameter lines. The reason why you have big reels is so you can have the big, heavy line capacity. Well, we're not doing that here. We're fishing very light lines. Even if you're fishing a 400-gram jig, what pound test line would you think you'd want to fish with? Anybody give a little guess? 30? Actually, if I'm fishing a 400-gram jig and I'm going down 400 feet, 500 feet, I want to fish 20-pound braid. And the reason why I want to fish 20-pound braid is because of current. Okay, I'm a fisherman, not an artist, okay? So there's John right there fishing. Here's the bottom. Now the fish are holding in this area. If you send down, you're going to go straight down, and here's your jig. All right? If you use heavy lines, what happens? The current is going to catch that line. All right? And it's going to cause that line from about here to bow like this. We do not want that in slow pitch. And the reason why is we're wanting to work the jig. So when I raise that rod up that 3 or 4 feet, or I crank that reel one turn, I want to move the jig. But if you've got scope in the line because of the current, you're not moving the jig, you're moving the line, but the jig is not going to move. So we want to eliminate this, and by doing that, we go with this very small diameter lines. Now I do fish, excuse me, one of my rigs is set up with 50-pound braid and a 40-pound monofilament top shot. This is 50-pound braid on this one. I've got 40-pound monofilament top shot. The top shot that you're going to use, you can use fluorocarbon, you can use monofilament. I prefer to use monofilament because it has a little bit more stretch. I find fishing around a lot of structure, not on a sandy bottom, but a lot of structure. Then I'll go to fluorocarbon because it's a little more abrasion resistant. All right. Now the length of the top shot, 10 to 12 feet. That's all. The reason why I want that is that it has stretch. Braid line has 0 stretch to it. But I don't need 40, 50, 60 feet like we do on our conventional gears, because these rods are a built-in spring on their own, and they'll absorb a lot of the energy from when you get a strike. So 10-foot top shot on your braid. Now the reason why this one is set up with 50-pound braid and a heavy top shot is my goal this year is to hook a bluefin tuna on it. And this has the capability of doing it. Other ones are set up with 20-pound braid and a 25-pound top shot, okay? Leaders you don't need. You're tying directly to the top shot. Now, here's the problem. If you're running a 10 or 12-foot top shot, and every time you tie a jig on, what happens? You are whittling down your top shot, your leader. So the way to solve that is on the end of your leader, tie on a welded ring. Okay? Now, with this welded ring, I've opened the door to multiple jig changes, and I'm not whittling down my leader. So, in order to do that, you got a welded ring on that you're going to put on the end of that leader. I just use an improved clinch knot. I've never had a problem with it. As long as you tie it properly, it's probably one of the best knots out there. Now this is what you're going to really need to do. These are split rings. And when you do a split ring, your new best friend is going to be split ring pliers. So if you've never used them, you're going to have to learn how to use them. There's lots of people out there on YouTube that are going to say, show you a little video on how to use them. Just learn them, learn to use them in your sleep, because you're going to be using these a lot to change your jig. Remember, you're not retying every time. You're doing the split. And when you do the split ring, you're not going to be able to see it. This is the top of the jig. We'll add a split ring here. Then the split ring goes to my welded ring. Okay? Now also, this has a single assist hook on the bottom. That's fine. But I will put a double assist hook on the top, and that will attach to the split ring. Okay? So, and the reason why is I'm running multiple hooks because these hooks are fairly light, and if you hook a good sized fish on one single light hook, there are odds that it'll straighten the hook out and you'll lose your fish. But if you've got double assist hooks on the top, double assist hooks on the bottom, we're never fishing trebles. It's always single assist. You have now, the fish had bit at the bait, at the jig. He's got that one hook in his lip there, and now you're starting to work him. Well, guess what? You've got 3 more hooks flying around his head, and he's going to get one stuck in the gill plate, one up underneath. Now you've got 3 to 4 contact points on that fish. You're not going to lose them. And you'll notice that when you bring up these fish, and you see it. Sometimes you'll have every single hook embedded in them. Any questions so far? Now the hooks, you're going to need to have several different styles of hooks. They're all going to be assist. Now assist hooks are a special bent hook with a cord tied to them. All right? And they will come like this, where they'll have a hook, your cord, and a welded ring. Another one, these are the BKK hooks. Another one, you got your light hook, the cord, and the ring. You're going to use that welded ring, attach it to the split ring. Remember, that split ring is going to be your hub for everything. Okay? You attach your leader welded ring to the split ring. You attach the hooks to the split ring. You attach the jig to the split ring. And that's going to be your best success for keeping fish on and not losing them. For, like I said, on the top shot, you can use monofilament. If you find you want to use fluorocarbon, we have our extreme fluorocarbon. This one happens to be 25-pound test. It's about 25 meters in length. You don't need a ton of line. Remember, each one is 10 foot. Okay, maybe add a foot for your knots. Okay, that way you can maintain the 10 foot. I do like using this when I'm around any kind of structure where I have the possibility of rubbing up against something, or I got a rocky bottom. This has a tendency to survive better than the monofilament. Now, you saw me earlier, I had this little foam thing on that one reel. Well, these are what we call rod buoys, so if a rod happened to go overboard, you know, it makes it float. Well, that I'm not worried about that. But if you noticed, there's no Hypalon here. There's no EV foam. And you put this on the rod holder in your boat, and it's just banging this all to pieces. So by putting this on, okay, by adding this on here, we're actually creating a cushion so it's protecting the graphite on the rod. And then just take it off when you start fishing. Also, these rods are incredibly light. Feel how light that is and pass it on down. I mean, for what it is, it looks like a little kitty's fishing rod, but extremely light. And for that reason, when you're on the boat, on your private boat or on a friend's boat, never, ever, ever put them in the gunnel rail rod holders. But guess what can happen? You hit that one rogue wave, and boom, there it goes. Hence the name rocket launcher. It just sent your rod flying right there, and old Davy Jones has got a new rig, compliments of you. So if you have inboard, you know, rod holders like I have on my boat around the center console, stack them in there. Okay, and that's the safest place to have them. Another thing that you're going to find yourself needing is a good quality lure bag, jig bag, to hold all the jigs. You want it to store all of your jigs. You don't necessarily store your jigs with the hooks on them. Some people do. I have a few that I do that to, but not all of them. I always have one that's got pouches in it, so I actually keep all my hooks in the pouch, and then as I'm getting ready for that day's of fishing, I'll actually add the assist hooks at that time. If you noticed that all of mine that I'm using are conventional reels, where the reel sits on top. Now, you can spin fish for slow pitch. You can use a spinning outfit. It does have its pros and cons. One of the pros is it's easy to use. Everybody pretty much knows how to use a spinning reel. Now, one of the cons. As you're sending it down, you want to have the bail open. Now, you're going to have a hard time regulating the speed of that jig going down. Because remember what happens if it goes down too fast? It starts to flutter and wobble. So you got to maintain a certain speed on. Real easy by your thumb on top of the reel. A little more difficult on a spinning reel. Another disadvantage is we're fishing deep. Now this one here has a capacity to hold, what was that? I saw it on here for the braid, 20-pound braid. 20-pound braid, you've got like 500 yards of 20-pound braid, okay? Yes, 500 yards. All right. Now, if I'm going to be going real deep, you're going to end up with a lot of friction happening off of the top of that spool as it's paying out. Lots of friction, which in some cases can damage the reel, in some cases can damage your line, but it's just not good to have the friction. That's one of the things, the reason why I'm not fishing spinning is for that reason. And, you know, it's actually a very nice outfit. It's a Penn Battalion slow pitch rod made by Penn, and the Penn Slammer 4 spinning reel. A fantastic setup. So if you want to get into it, you know, basically, and you don't want to invest in conventional, this is capable. Now, any spinning reel can do it. The one you have sitting in the garage already is capable. The rod is where you're going to make your first investment. So if you got a spinning reel, you want to make sure you get a rod that is designated slow pitch. Because remember, we're sending the lure down, we're lifting the rod will load, and then once you stop moving the rod or stop cranking, then the lure will unload, and that's pitching the lure. Any questions? Okay. I got a smart group here today. Now, the technique. This is where a lot of people will see others on the YouTube channels, and you'll see multiple techniques. There's no one wrong technique, and there's no one set hardcore. This is the way you do it, technique. I have a technique that I like, and that is I put the rod under my forearm, and this is how I'm fishing in this particular style. I got the reel gripped. I got it in free spool. I'm sending it down. I got my thumb on the reel to regulate the speed that it goes down so it doesn't want to flutter on me. I hit bottom. Keynote, always want to hit bottom. Okay? When you hit bottom, give it a half a turn. Now keep in mind that when you have high retrieval reels, like a 6.4 to 1, half a turn is raising you 24 inches or more. Okay? So that's, you want to stay within that. Now, the way I like to slow pitch jig is I like to raise it up. It'll load. Once I see the tip unload, and you can feel it, I drop it down and let it flutter. When I feel the rod tip bend, that means it's loading up again, and I'll do it one more time. And the reason why is I'm working that water column twice. Now, there's a lot of people that they'll have the rod here and they give it a crank. Rod loads the rod and it flexes, and they're not really dropping the rod. Well, all you've done is just raise the jig, but it didn't do anything afterwards. So what I do is you raise it up the second time, gone down, boom, I had nothing there. Okay, one crank. I just raised it 40 inches. Raise it up, drop it down, and I work the water column in intervals of 2. Okay, you don't have to work it all the way to the surface. Once you've done it 4 or 5 times, you've gone, 20 feet in the water column, go back down. And then work that area. Any questions on that? It's really not that difficult. You'll see people speed jig. Now, all you're making the jig goes like this. That's a fleeing bait. Remember, we're trying to make that bait come alive by making it, well, come alive dead. Come alive dead. And we're wanting to look like a dying or wounded bait fish that's going down like this. Halibut, love them. Sea bass, love them. That's why, I like to use the light colors, because it simulates a squid. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Can anybody name a fish that's out there that does not like squid? Every time I fish with squid, I practically caught everything. Yeah, I don't think there's a fish out there that won't eat a squid. So, get to the bottom, raise it up. Once it loads and unloads, unload, drop it down. Let that jig flutter. You feel it load, either give it a crank or raise it up. It depends how often you want to work that water column. Now, the type of fish that we can catch all kinds of fish. Halibut. The jig that I would use for catching the halibut. Right there. Sculpin. Big sculpin. Okay? Another one. Whoever caught a sheep's head. Good meat, good eating, aren't they? Why? Because they eat crustacean. They eat the same thing that lobster and crabs eat. Okay. They also love squid. Okay, sheep's head love those. All right? And sheep's head are opportunistic. They will not go through any extreme effort. They do not want to go put any work in to get that bait. We see the food, if it's dying and it gets within 2 feet of them, oh, I think I'll take that, and goes up, bites it, and then goes right back down. That's it. So, yellowtail. Okay, now we're coming up off of calico bass. Definitely, because they love squid. You can even slow pitch sardine patterns. Okay, dying dead sardine floating to the bottom. You're going to get your calico. Sand bass. Yes, you're going to get them. Now we're going to get into that mid-water column where we're commonly seeing your white sea bass. Well, white sea bass are on the bottom and up. Now yellowtail, oh, they'll go for it. They're opportunistic. They won't turn down any food. Like I said, remember I said on this bigger one that my goal is to catch a bluefin on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be doing an anchovy color or a sardine color, and I'm going to be working that in the water column where I'm going to be metering fish. Okay? And that could be 80 feet to 300 feet. Okay? When the bluefin show up in our waters here, if they're not right on top, getting the schooling bait fish, where they're all piled together, they're down 300 feet, and that's where they're feeding. So float pitch at 300. I'm sure I'm going to get one. Maybe next year's a fishing classic, I'll have pictures and stories of a bluefin on that rod. Well, I think I've pretty much covered everything for you folks. Any questions or anything that I can help you with, be free to ask. I'm going to be over here in the fishing department, and I can show you the different types of gear again, or show you what we have in stock that would be perfect for you folks.
You got your own boat, or you got like a...
I have a boat, and it's a 21-foot center console, which is perfect for this method of fishing. You don't need a big yacht. In fact, I got another friend of mine that's got a 55-foot Viking, and it's even fun to do it off of that boat because of the cockpit size and the way it is. And what's nice is that, remember, you're not dealing with any bait, so you don't have the mess to deal with.
What about a party boat? Is that okay?
Party boats are really starting to accommodate the slow pitch. In San Diego this last season, they actually, don't remember which boats it was, but they did have full-blown slow pitch charters. So they're slowly the reason why they have to, because it produces fish. The technique does produce.
I'm just wondering, like, you got to get around the front,
You know what? That would be, I'm going to be honest with you, that's the best place to be when you're slow pitching, because that's where the transducer is reading. The transducer is right at the bow. Okay? It's not at the stern, because that's where all your turbulence is, and you're not going to get true reading. So it's forward on the bow. And you're going to go straight down. The only time it's beneficial to be at the stern is when they're chumming and they're throwing bait, and that's bringing the fish up to that corner.
that's where you should start at the front.
Yeah, but if you want a slow pitch or bottom fish, the bow is always the best. Any other questions? All right, once again, my name is John. I'm in the fishing department here at Bass Pro Shop, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or any technical information that you folks have.
Usually they're telling you to get a rail rod. That's a shorter rod. I mean, can it get around the anchor and then get around the top?
That would be a tough one. You'd have no problem at the back of the boat, but to work around the anchor rope or anything like that, yeah, that would be tough. All righty? Thank you very much, folks.
Just a reminder, everybody, you can help support the Freeman Adventures YouTube channel by buying some merch, like a hat or a shirt. You can do that by going to embroiderycreations.net. Really appreciate all you do for the Freeman Adventures YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody.